I am so excited to talk to Chloé Daniels today, who just 5 years ago was strapped with close to $70,000 in debt between student loans, car payments, and credit cards. She felt like she was stuck and that she would never retire and be trapped in her 9-to-5 job forever. Sitting here today, Chloé has left her corporate job to become a money educator. Her net worth is close to $300,000, and she's on track to retire by age 47. I can't wait for you to learn how she did it and show you how you can recreate her financial journey. Chloé, I am so excited to talk to you today.
Yay! Thanks for having me on. It's so nice to meet you. And I was telling Blake before the show, I was like, when she asked me if I wanted to be on, I was like, are you kidding me? BiggerPockets? I was like, this is like the first podcast I ever listened to when I was getting my money right. So it feels like such a full circle moment.
Oh, that's awesome. So how did you discover financial independence?
So it was all through just the rabbit hole of getting into personal finance. I remember when I first started, I was like only focused on debt freedom because that's, you know, some of the loudest voices in the space are all about debt freedom. So I thought that was really all there was to personal finance. And I remember kind of just like starting my Googling journey, and then I'd landed on some blogs. One of the blogs that I always like to shout out is Millennial Revolution. I don't know if you know them, the Quit Like a Millionaires.
Yes.
Bryce
and Christy.
Exactly. I got obsessed with them, and that's kind of who I discovered the FIRE movement from. And then from there, I started listening to podcasts, and that's when I found BiggerPockets and Choose FI and all those big ones out there. And it was just a hill of getting completely obsessed that turned into a very large snowball that is now my business. So,
well, welcome to the cult. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you so much.
So what was your life like before pursuing financial independence? I gave a little hint and said you were $70,000 in debt. How did you get into that debt, and how did you get out of that debt?
The majority of that debt was from student loans, but I had spent a while kind of relying on other people and hoping that, oh, I'll just meet somebody and I'll figure out this whole money thing, or I'll let them manage this whole money thing. And I just kind of told myself that, oh, you're not good with money, so you shouldn't be the decision maker. You shouldn't be the one who's responsible for all these really big life decisions. And so in my 20s, I would constantly be attaching myself to the wrong person. And that's what ended me in one bad situation after another. I took a look at the common denominator, and the common denominator was me. And I was like, listen, Chloé, dumber people than you have figured this out before. And that was like, that's such a mantra for me, because every time I tell myself that, I'm like, why not me? And it literally with the Christy and Bryce, when I was reading their blog, Millennial Revolution, and feeling like jealousy, I was like, Chloé, this jealousy is telling you want to do this. Like, it's jealousy is telling you that this is something you're interested in at least trying. And I was like giving myself all these excuses like, no, you're not smart enough. You don't make enough money. You're not in tech. You don't know what you're doing. And then I would just tell myself, dumber people than you have done it before. And so that kind of gave me permission to just try. And that's kind of how I started the journey, was like, well, let's just try. Let's just see what happens if we try. And as a recovering perfectionist and people pleaser, that word try kind of gave me permission to just screw it all up, but get started. Because I feel like the getting started part is like the most important part.
Getting started is the most important part. Let's underline that, because yes, you are going to make mistakes. I've made mistakes. Chloé, I'm sure you've made mistakes. Like you said, dumber people than me have figured out money, and they do it very well. It's not that hard, but it is super intimidating if you don't know what you're supposed to do. So how did you figure it out? Like, what were your first steps?
So the Googling was definitely step one. Well, actually, no, that's not true. Step one was really, I had this moment where I was like, I don't know what to do. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start collecting data. And for me, that was, I literally had a tiny little notebook that I took with me everywhere. And I started for 2 weeks. I just wrote down every time I spent money, because the idea of like going into my bank account and looking at like the past spending, that seemed way too overwhelming. So I was like, let me make this low tech, easy, because I won't mess it up if it's easy. And so literally that's all I did, is I went through and I wrote down everything I spent just for 2 weeks. And then I went through and I categorized things, and I was like circling things, color coding things, because I'm very like hands-on and tactile when it comes to my learning style. And I was blown away by how much money I was just wasting on things like eating out and drinking and like doing things that at the time, if you'd asked me what my core values were, I would not have said eating out and being drunk. But like, if you looked at my money and where my money was going, that's what it would have told you, is like, you really value eating out and being drunk. And so that was a really big wake up call, because I had been using this narrative of, oh, I don't have money, so I can't travel, I can't do the things that I want. That was like the narrative I'd tell myself as to why my life wasn't where I wanted it to be. But in reality, that practice alone showed me, oh, you have money. It's just not going to any of the things that you say you value. And so that kind of come to Jesus moment really made me feel some shame, of course, because, none of us like to be faced with our flaws and the things that are inconsistent with what we think is true about ourselves. But it also disgusted me enough to be like, all right, it's time to make a change. And so from there, I started a zero-based budget, even though I didn't even know that's what it was. I was just like, I'm going to use this Google sheet and I'm going to make a I'm just going to assign my dollars a job. And I started blogging about it, because I knew that if I was telling people about what I was doing, it would keep me accountable. And that was what I was afraid of, is I didn't want to fall off, and I didn't want to not actually take it seriously. So the blog, I think, helped a lot, where I was like, I announced it and I was like, I'm this much money in debt and this is what I'm going to do about it. I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm going to just like explain the process as I go and learn. And it just kind of changed and grew and evolved from there.
Okay, so what were your parameters for your getting out of debt? Did you have a certain amount of time that you wanted to get out of debt, or did you just let it kind of flow?
My original plan was all about debt freedom. It was before I truly understood what wealth building was. And so when I posted that blog post in October 2018 that announced how much debt I was in, it was like, I'm $70,000 in debt. In that, I made a debt-free by 33 plan. And I believe I was 27 at the time. I'm 32 now. And I had essentially just planned out how I was going to pay off all that debt by the time I was 33. And I knew for sure I'd get it by 33. And I was like, oh, that has a nice ring to it. I was pretty sure I was going to get to it sooner. But I liked making a realistic goal and then having a stretch goal. And so it was a debt-free by 33 plan. I'm 32 now, and I am not debt-free. But the reason is because I realized that actually wasn't important for my wealth building journey. So for the first 2 years, I dedicated an extra $2,000 every single month to my debt. And I paid down over $40,000 in 2 years. And as I was learning and educating throughout the process, which I did the avalanche method, which is where you put your extra payments on the highest interest rate debt. In that process and educating myself, I ended up refinancing my student loans twice, and I got my student loans down to 3.54% interest rate. As I continued educating myself, I started learning more about this whole investing thing, but I was so afraid of investing. I was so certain that I wasn't smart enough, that I couldn't do it, that it was like for other people, that I just kept ignoring it until finally in 2020, I couldn't really ignore it anymore. I had read and educated so much on this power of investing, and I still wasn't doing it. And so in 2020, I decided, all right, we don't really need to worry about this 3.54% interest rate debt anymore. Like, this is like everything I'm reading, all the numbers I am running is telling me like you're better off dedicating more money to investing, especially with how young I was at the time. Like you need to make the switch. And so absolutely terrified, I started making that switch in 2020. I started building up my emergency fund as well as investing. And that's really when my net worth started to take off. But it was a really hard switch going from just the debt freedom mindset to that wealth building mindset, because it's scary. The debt freedom thing is like a sure thing. Whereas when you're learning how to invest, you're like, I don't know, what if I lose all my money?
You put $2,000 a month towards your debt. Where did that come from?
In my journey, focused heavily on increasing my income. Like, that was probably the number one thing that I would say. If I was telling somebody to repeat my path, that has to be really up there, because of exactly what you said. You can't do it in a quick time frame. If you're $70,000 in debt and you're making $50,000 a year, it's going to take a lot longer. So that was one of the first things that I did, was focusing on how can I bring in more income through side hustles, but mostly through my 9-to-5. I was constantly looking for, okay, how can I increase my income through my 9-to-5? But that $2,000 came from budgeting, which is insane. Like, going through my spending, one of the biggest realizations I had was that I was spending hundreds of dollars on eating out, on all my categories. I was obviously spending a lot more because I wasn't paying attention to them. So what I did is I went through and I was like, how can I pull out $2,000 from my current spending? So I went through and I created the budget, and the budget I had to like adjust many, many times because I would go too extreme. I'd be like, I'm only going to spend $200 on groceries. But I went through every single category and was like, where can I cut out? What can I reduce? What can I reallocate? And I was able to pull out that $2,000. Some of the things that I did was I drastically reduced my eating out budget. I almost completely got rid of eating out and drinking. I also reduced my grocery budget just by paying attention to my grocery budget and like meal prepping and going to Aldi instead of Jewel and all these more expensive grocery stores. But I also sold my car. So I had a eventually paid off in this journey. I had a paid off Prius, and I was like, this Prius is still costing me money because parking, at the time I lived in Chicago, parking was always expensive. I was getting tickets. I always need maintenance and repairs. And I calculated that I was spending about $4,000 on my paid off car a year. And I was like, I don't really need this when I'm living in Chicago. Like I can get by without the car. And so it was doing things like that where I was thinking outside of the box of how can I further reduce my expenses so that I then can have this money to dedicate towards my debt and eventually my emergency fund and eventually my investing. But then at the same time, how do I increase my income so that I can maximize my efforts?
So when you started investing, where did you start? You're not the first person that I've ever talked to who said, well, I don't know how to invest. I'm scared of investing, so I'm not going to. How did you get over that hump, and what did you start investing in?
I just started with my 401k because I knew I was too afraid. I didn't understand what a Roth IRA was. I didn't understand the difference between Roth and traditional. I barely understood my 401k. And so I started there because I knew it was automated. I knew that I was investing, even if I didn't understand what I was investing in yet. So the first thing I did is I just increased my 401k contributions because it was like, at least I'm doing it. At least I'm crossing off. This is like, okay, I'm investing. Then as I continued to educate myself, I then made these baby steps where it was like, okay, now that I understand what I want to invest in, I'm going to call Fidelity and ask them to let me manage my own account because obviously I was paying a fee to have somebody manage my account for me. So that was like step 2. So then I got control over my own 401k and I could pick my own investments. And then step 3 was going in and reallocating and looking at like, oh, I'm in all these actively managed funds. I don't think I really want to be in these. Let me pick something else. And thinking at the time, I thought at the time I was picking index funds, but it turns out I didn't. I picked more actively managed mutual funds. So then taking more education, going back in and being like, okay, I messed that one up. Let's try this again. Let's get these index funds going. So that is why I am an advocate often for 401ks, is because it gets you started even when you don't know anything about investing. And that's the beauty of it. It's already coming out of your paycheck. It's already going into your investments and you don't have to do anything. And like, we are often our biggest barriers when it comes to getting started because of the fear, because of like, spending the money already and things along those lines. So I think that's huge.
What were your parameters for FI? Like once you discovered financial independence, did you think, oh, I need to save up? Everybody says $1 million because I spend $40,000 a year. Did you have any specific number in mind, or I can retire when I hit X number in investments or X number of passive income? Or were you hoping to retire by a certain age?
So it has transformed for me over time because when I was still working in corporate America, my goal was just let me get out of here as quickly as possible. Like I was making enough money that at the time when I was still there, I figured I could probably, based off of how much I was investing at the time and how frugally I was willing to live my life then with both the side hustle and my income at my job, which when I left my job in 2021, I was making $130,000 a year. So in that time frame from 2018 to 2021, like I told you, I was working really hard on increasing my income. I had taken my income from $70,000 to $130,000 in just at my 9-to-5. But then I was also making money with Chloé. So in 2021, I started making about $5,000 a month from Chloé from doing one-on-one coaching. So I was making a lot of money from the 9-to-5 plus the Chloé stuff and just investing as much as I possibly could. But while I was just in corporate America and Clover wasn't a thing. I wasn't coaching like this pre-Clover. I had a plan to retire in about 15 years based off of just what I was making there. And that was when I was very frugal. So I was like, oh, I'll be fine on like $1 million or 1.5 million. So that's what I was aiming for. And then as I developed and changed and learned, by the time I quit my job in 2021, when I was Clover money coach and was making money at Clover, I realized that the retiring early thing was not as important to me if I was doing something that I loved. So that's when my time frame extended, and now I'm looking at 47. And I'm more of a fat fire kind of person these days. I'm not trying to be or live super frugally anymore. Obviously, living in San Diego would not have been a very frugal decision. So now we're looking at like 47 and about $2 million.
So let's talk back to the B word, the budget. Do you keep a strict budget now?
No. These days, I just focus on how much am I investing and how much am I saving. So that's more important, is hitting those numbers. And then as long as I'm hitting those numbers, I don't really care what I'm spending my money on. But it took me years to get to this point. And I know, like, I usually recommend people start with like a true budget, because like after a few years of doing a true budget, I don't think most people have to track every dollar that they spend. Some people like doing that, but I think a lot of us, the goal is to get to the place where you only really focus on the important stuff. And like, to me, what I'm saving, what I'm investing, that's more important than what every dollar goes to.
Okay, so what are you investing in? What are you saving? Let's talk about percentages.
So right now, I'm definitely cut back this year, where we're focusing on only investing about $3,000 a month, whereas last year I was closer to $6,000 a month. This year, a lot of my money is going into reinvesting in my business. So I don't count that as traditional investments. It's more like the strict investing in the stock market. We're around $3,000. And then in terms of saving is really the saving money for taxes, which I don't know if you count that or enough. So every month I'm putting away 30% for taxes. And then my emergency fund's pretty much set. And I still haven't decided if I'm going to buy a house ever. So I'm like playing with that idea right now. I want to get both my investments up, and then I also want to make a few moves in the business before I start saving for a house. But right now it's pretty simple.
Okay. And where are you investing that money?
All in the stock market. So for the most part, honestly, if not all of it, we're going into low cost index funds.
And is that post-tax, pre-tax? Combination of both?
It's mostly pre-tax. In fact, I think it's all pre-tax right now. So because of the business owner life, I'm more focused on reducing my taxable income right now. So the majority of it is going into a solo 401k. And then I've also got the traditional IRA. And then I've also got a brokerage account.
Do you think pursuing FI changes the fundamental way people perceive work and life?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think it does, because you have to really ask yourself what's actually important to you. Like, it's so easy to go through life just kind of asleep, doing what everybody does, doing what you've been told your whole life that you're supposed to do. You're supposed to get the 9-to-5 job, and you're supposed to stay at that 9-to-5 job until you retire. And then you retire and you live out your quote unquote golden years. And when you challenge the system and you look at it of, hey, what if you could leave? What if you could pursue something that's it's not easy, but it opens up your worlds and your ability to choose to live on your own terms, would you do it? And that's a hard question. I think a lot of people, when even faced with that, as I've seen with my students, when you ask, like, what is your true ideal life if money wasn't an issue? If you had all the money stuff figured out, what would your life actually look like? How would you spend your time? Most of us would be spending our time a little bit differently. And so I do think that challenges people to really get intentional about what we want and to question what we've learned and what we've been told is the norm.
Good question. Great answer. Thank you so much. That was great.
And I think about the FI community, and we all are very intentional people. I mean, you could look at all the Instagram accounts with the words intention in it, and it's like, in the finance community, we have so many intentional this, intentional that, because that's truly what it's about. It's like looking at, what do I want, and then how do I get there? Because at the end of the day, whatever it is that we want, we have to have money.
Yeah, I love that. I love the confidence. I love the drive. I love all of this. Now, back when you first discovered FI, what would you say to that 27-year-old woman? I'm sorry, 27-year-old woman.
Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh. Oh, man. to give you context, at the time, I was fresh out of like a pretty abusive relationship and was like, I had just started therapy for trauma, and I was very much just like getting my footing again of just like learning how to trust myself and becoming this very confident person you see in front of you. I think I would have just gone to her and just said, it's going to be so much better than you realize. Like, you were on such an incredible track that you can't even imagine what's going to happen in the next 6 years. Like, your life, what it is now, could not be more different than what you're about to achieve, see, do, and the people you're going to help along the way. Like, Chloe, it's going to be so freaking great. Like, I would just want to give her this confidence, and I would want to tell her it's going to be okay, because I was just not in a good place. And Chloe Bear really came from this place of needing something else, of needing a purpose, of needing, I mean, it was literally this desperate, I need to get out of corporate America. So like, I'm just going to save a bunch of money and retire as early as possible. So to now be at this place where it's like, it ended up so much better than even that, you know?
Yeah. Oh, I love this. Chloe, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for your time today. Where can people find you if they're looking for you online?
Yeah, I'm everywhere at Chloé Bear Money Coach. Bear is spelled Bare, because we get bear, we talk about real stuff. But on Instagram is where I'm most active, Chloé Bear Money Coach. And then I'm on TikTok as well at Chloé Bear Money Coach. And we've got a blog, chloebear.com.
Chloé Daniels, freight train. Do not get in her way, because she will run you over with her confidence and no delusion whatsoever. And you, my dear viewers, if you like this video, please click the thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more videos featuring inspiring fire stories just like Chloe's. Thanks for watching. This is Mindy Jensen signing off.